Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Sara Bedr, Director of Strategy and Transformation at the Council of Health Insurance, and I will be your moderator for this evening. In today's session on overcoming resistance to change with effective strategies, Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Rabi'a will dive deep into this topic. For those of you who don't know Dr. Abdulaziz, he is a consultant of family medicine and the Deputy General Director of Health Services, with over 17 years of experience in both public and private healthcare sectors. He holds 2 board certifications in family medicine and earned advanced degrees in health policy from the University of Chicago and health economics from the London School of Economics. Additionally, he holds certifications in business development, strategy, and financing from Stanford Business School. He also led leadership roles at the Health Services Ministry of Defense and the Saudi Health Council, where he led on national initiatives in health economics and policy. While at the Center of National Health Insurance, he contributed to value-based healthcare frameworks and population health management strategies. As we all know, in healthcare, transformation is not an option, it is a necessity. However, no transformation can succeed without acknowledging the resistance that change naturally brings. Today, we'll explore the root causes for that resistance, the models, and the strategies that help us overcome it. And we'll learn from real-world success stories. Before welcoming Dr. Abdulaziz, let me remind you that all questions will be taken after the session. And now, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Rabi'a, who will be shedding light on this exciting topic.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Ms. Sarah, for the lovely introduction. I'd like to thank also the Saudi Patient Safety Center for hosting this webinar, and Ms. Heba for her coordination. And I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today after working hours. So today we'll be covering our key learning is to identify types and root cause resistance for change in healthcare organization. Also to see some effective strategies to overcome resistance, explore change theories like Kotter and Adker and other models, and then we will deep dive into some real examples and show you how did that impact us. Now we'll take you for a small video so that we can see how organizations look at change and how do they understand it once we spell it. So just give me a second.
What this organization desperately needs is change. Actually, what this organization really needs is repositioning. That means that what this organization really needs is a one-on-one approach.
So as you have seen,
more organized. So I hired an AI work assistant.
Sorry.
Her name's Motion. Mof.
So as you have seen that, so do you see the screen or? Can you see the screen now? Okay. So as you have seen that change usually has a different understanding when people just say change. Needs a lot of explanation, a lot of understanding and communication. So maybe we would like to, I would like you to please scan this barcode and also try to explain resistance. What does it mean in one word from your side? I will enlarge it just a second. So please scan the code and start to answer. I see 4 people have scanned. Okay. When you complete it, just try to submit, please. Yeah. No change. Right back. Hold on. Okay. Start to see staying the same. Fear, refuse, reluctant. You see refusal becoming more obvious that people are not enjoying the change or trying to avoid it in a way. So resistance is no change or refusal, not effective. So it's all means to the same word, which is resistance. Thank you for the engagement. I really like the way that everyone's creative and trying to get new words. Challenge, comfort zone, unwillingness. So you're all right. Let's keep this the same. Don't close your browsers because we'll move to another QR in a while. So keep it open. I'll go back to the presentation. So can you see the slides now? Okay. So basically, if we want to summarize, change is the way that you transfer or even transition from people, system, or even environment from one position to another, or from one status quo to another. Against that, or the opposite to that, is the resistance. So people are tending not to move or unwilling, like what you have clearly mentioned. The reason why we're trying to set the stage here, because sometimes you might do a change that becomes more costly or harmful for the organization. It might destroy the culture by itself. So it becomes harmful to do that. The other thing that we need to know that there is a lot of perspective, which is not just only the physical, but also emotional attachment to that, or even mental burden around it. And the change is unstoppable force. As we know that nowadays, we have seen the AI technology, so that physicians are now using a lot of diagnostics through AI, telehealth, where you can have access through remote areas, EMR, where you have decision support that sometimes overcome physicians' decisions and becomes burden. Our population are aging, and we have seen that we have achieved our 2030 targets. And that means that we need the new models. We have seen the population health management that's coming up, the way that we empower patient, the shared decision. Also, in terms of patient safety and quality. So your PDSA is a continuous change and iterative process, so that we need to set up the stage. And the other dimension, when you look at political and policy decisions, so by itself, The Vision 2030 is a political and a policy decision that we want to transform the country to be a better one. And also, if we zoom into the health transformation program, the shift from hospital-based to primary healthcare base, where you can see that we develop team-based care, where that needs also a real orchestration between team member, involving them in such a change, and so on. The economical pressure, we start to see a lot of organizations are pushing around value-based, moving from fee-for-service to like bundle payments, reimbursement model that try to lower the cost for healthcare. And finally, we have seen also the crisis of COVID-19 and how that hit the systems very hard. So the things that they used to do over 2 years, 3 years in terms of transformation, now it's done over 2 months or 3 months, which is a fast and rapid acceptance of the change. So some of the fun facts that we need to understand, which is usually 70% of the organization who try to do initiative change fails. And usually that's due to personal or a personal commitment to change. The other good fact, which is success factor, is led by a strong leadership and sponsorship around it. A very good example is what we are living today. His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, is leading the transformation, the Vision 2030. So that it show you a very strong commitment on how do we transfer a situation, how do we drive change. In healthcare by itself, when they started to introduce EMR, electronic medical records, they have noticed a drop in terms of like patient safety and errors for 52%. And finally, which is I want to highlight, the primary cause of resistance is poor communication between each other. If we look into the change, usually it's very disruptive. So usually you have your daily operation, which is business as usual, normal noise, you don't have that much disruption. Once you announce the change, you start to see the peaks. So people start to be afraid, they push back. Individual or groups, they start to create some sort of like, I would say, collisions so that they can the resistance. And that could be because of high stakes on ground. Either you're changing schedules, you're pushing more, for example, clinics for doctors, you're introducing a new system, you're updating policy that affect multiple stakeholders. After a while, this becomes more thin and people start to accept it. And if we want to explain this better, Elizabeth Rose, who has designed the build for the 5 stages for grief, which is when you lose someone, you start to grieve. So you go from like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, then acceptance over time. And then they come with this change curve. So it's a similar concept. When you start to announce the change, you shock the system. So people are questioning and surprised about it. And then they start to denial. Their denial is basically a sort of proactive mechanism where they want to shield themselves from such an activity. And then frustration starts to kick in, where they start to recognize that there is a different theme, someone is angry. And it's a very good opportunity when frustration comes in, you start to plug in the early communication, answer the questions that people has. Then you can move from there into the depression, where you see the depression comes in and out over the whole cycle. It's not fixed, so it moves between the stages over time. And then the experimental phase, where people start to explore what's the new thing, how can I handle it? And then they become, the decision comes in to learn how to work with the new situation, how to believe in it, how to work on it. And then finally, it becomes an integrated within the system. And then you can see the happy phase, which is the acceptance of the change. So if we split the resistance into active and passive, so you can see people who are really active in their resistance. So they might vocally oppose it. They might critique your opinion. They might start to argue. They might try to block you. They even try to undermine the activities or the efforts, or even distort the facts. So telling some sort of things that is not fact. So just to make sure that people who are trying to buy in, not to buy in. The other thing, which is the passive resistance, which is I think most of you has seen it. So they don't say anything. They start to avoid. They delay. They become very silent or disengaged in the activity that you're trying to do. And basically, they agree with you, thumbs up, and then when you separate, nothing happens. So status quo. or even they try to fail the implementation change because there is a conflict of interest, something that is meaning for them on that change not to happen. Or they start to stand by and look for the change. They don't help you. They don't try to course correct what's happening. Or they might hold information that can help you in building that. So if there is, like, for example, previous effort that happened or previous activities, they hold it. They don't share it with you. And we might also look at it from a different angle, which is the psychological impact. So people are usually afraid of new things. They don't want to try it. They don't want to enjoy it. The lose of control and the autonomy. So like doctors, when you give them, for example, decision support, or you put new regulations that takes out power from them. The comfort zone. People usually love the comfort zone. They don't want to go over it because it's something that they're used to it. They know it. They know they're expert on it. Once you take them out, it becomes chaotic for them. Or they might have been exposed to previous bad experience and change, so they don't want to do it. And usually we see that in strategies and changing from different strategy to strategy sometimes doesn't make sense. The other lens that we want to focus on, which is the interpersonal, how people and peers affect each other. So they might lose trust, for example, on leadership, or poor communication with teams between each other. So they don't have the same direction or the same activity or momentum to go there. Or the peer pressure. Usually we see that people, they don't like to change because the others did not change. So if I change, I might be doing something wrong other than the others. And finally, the conflict of interest, which is some of the stakeholders or the leaders, they don't want to give away some of their powers because it gives them stronger opposition. When we look into the management factors or the organization, usually change comes top down, and it does not involve much of people. And that by itself creates a huge resistance because people are not involved in the beginning. So the other thing is just how do you also involve the leadership? So if you don't have adequate leadership support, your line manager is not supporting you, your effort will be useless to drive that change. And then finally, the poor communication strategy. So a lot of efforts has happened in terms of like, how do you plan the change? What do you do with it? But there's no good communication. The people does not understand why. What is in it for them to do that? I want to take you to the second QR code, if you don't mind. I want you to, I'll take you from the other lens, sorry. I want you to scan it, and let's see together who are the highest resistance that we can see. So that's our second one. Okay, so we have doctors, we have nurses, we have IT, admin, and support staff. Which one do you think is the highest? Doctors. 2 answers for doctors. Okay. I see there's a competition between admin and nurses. Let's see who wins. Give it 3 more answers, and then we can move back to the slides. I mean, you're right. So I'll open the slides so that you can see the real life data. How do we see it, and why it's happening? So mainly, as you mentioned, all that physicians, unfortunately, were the highest, and usually because of like professional autonomy or looking for evidence. So we think that we know everything. So we're always right, and unfortunately. Second comes in, which is nurses, and usually comes in for workload increase and patient safety. And all of these are excuses, to be honest, not to move with the change. And then comes after that the admin, because always financials is a big burden for admin and the compliance. And then the support, which is also the job security, and especially nowadays with the AI is a massive risk for them, so that they need to adopt how to do it. And IT, they're the geniuses on how to complicate things and not doing it. Sorry. So this is also another QR. I'll take you to another one so that we can also. Yeah. So what's the main causes for resistance? We have multiple choices you can choose from it. I'll give you a hint. We mentioned it earlier in the beginning. We'll wait for like 3 more answers and move. Okay, so let's move. So thank you, everyone. You're also right. So usually the poor communication stands out very obviously in terms of resistance causes. So if you fail to communicate very well with your team, with the people, you will have a lot of resistance. Also, the number of staff involved. So you don't want to be the last to know that something is happening in your organization. And also, if you have weak leadership that is not supporting you, the resistance will be higher and the change will be almost nil. And then finally, the adequate training, which we'll see it in different models. So now moving to the models that we want to explore together, which is the evidence-based frameworks. So we have a Lewin's model for change. We have Kotter 8 steps process and the Adker, and we will mention for real-life examples. So if we start with the first model, which is Lewin's model. So apparent equilibrium, where you can see the cubes, usually where there is a balance between driving forces and resistant forces, so that can keep the system stuck in its place. And this is usually normal because in healthcare you can see high stakes, complex hierarchy, and also regulatory pressures. So people not try to move around. But if you want to create the change, you need to unfreeze this equilibrium, and you need to push more the driving forces to make sure that you shock the system and you prepare it. So you need to prepare the organization for change. You need to create some dissatisfaction and create the why for people to change. And then finally, over time, it will start to reduce the resistance forces. Then change will happen. So things will start to plug together. So change, usually you'll do a lot of trial, adjust and adapt for the new workflows. And over that, you will try to implement new workflows, behaviors, provide training and support, and start to communicate over and over and over to the teams. And then comes to the freeze, where you want it to stuck. So you can stabilize the new norm, you reinforce the behavior, you have a reward system, you change the org structure, you update your policy and procedure just to make sure that it is consistent and it is repeatable. If we move to the second model, which is Kotter 8-step model, so usually it looks into first or 3 segments. So the first segment where you create a climate to change, where the first stairs in the steps. So you create the urgency, you build the collegium, and then you create the vision. And then you move to the engagement enablement of the organization, where communicating the vision, empowering others, removing struggles, and also creating short wins. And then finally, you move to the sustainability, where you start to build on the change and embed it within the culture of the organization. So let's break it down. So when we say creating the urgency. It's not just like identifying low KPIs that does not make sense. No, you need to make an urgency by basically showing that keeping the status quo is dangerous. So you frame it with patient data, you frame it with consequences on the organization. You don't just leave it about KPIs, because KPIs, it's a trend. People will look at it every time and then. And then you start to build the collegium, where you assemble a team of influencing people. It's very important. It's not just a normal committee. You need to have people who have influence, people who can help you drive the change and also have authority. So you need to have a mix with leaders. And then you create a vision where you want to clarify where are we going, how this help us, and how stakeholders are aligned together and have an aspiration to hit. Then you communicate. Basically, when we say communicate, you walk the talk. So basically you say something and you do it. It's not just about saying it and nothing happens. You create volunteers who can become an ambassadors and drive the vision and encourage people to move around and try to be the positive energy in the room. Then you start to empower others, basically by identifying where is the barrier. So is it org structure? Is it a policy that needs to be updated? Is it the people who you need to influence, to push them, to drive them to move the obstacles in front of the other people? And then you need to create the quick wins. And the reason behind this, it boosts the morale and build the confidence of the team, because they see something on ground happening. So it becomes more and more energetic for them to go and move and move and move around to create this change. Then avoid early celebration. So people will see wins that, yes, we have become a victory, but it's important at this stage. Yes, you celebrate, but you don't stop. You scale up, you move it to the whole organization, because if you want it sustainable, it needs to be the new norm, the new culture. And then finally, where you can build embrace the change by basically changing organization structure, policies, becomes a new norm. Make the leaders also continue demonstrating the benefits, and then they start to talk about it, they start to engage with it. Now, moving to our last model, which is ADKAR. I think a lot of you have been engaged with this model, and usually it's used for like more toward the personal. So ADKAR stands for A, for the awareness, so where people are understanding the nature of the change and why they want to do it. The desire, so people were having the feel to join, so on, and they understand what is in it for them to do the change. Then the knowledge, where they basically understand it, they get trained, and then A stands for the ability for them to demonstrate the capability of doing the change and moving around it. And finally, reinforcing it by placing factors around behavior or structure that can sustain it. If you can see that most of these luck at the end is on the sustainability of the change, because change could happen. The problem with it is locking it within the organization. So all of the models at the end has something to lock them in it. Here I tried to give a small comparison. It's not something that is rocket science, but usually what I want to say here is that the focus for each model, it depends on like, is it a process, is it an organization, a complete transform, or individual within a journey that you want to do. The complexity levels, it's assumption, because it's the level that each model has it, and also the time frame. So the time frame could go up to 3 years, and we'll see some of these real life examples around it. And finally, what is it best for? Sometimes you need to do mixed models. So I remember talking with Sarah. She told me that they use mixed models, for example, in CHI to implement their strategy. So it's not always a fixed model that it's one size fits all. No. So sometimes you need to change between them or merge between these models. So the case study, the first one we'll talk about it, which is the King Abdulaziz Medical City, KMARC, where they start to implement their EMR system. At that time, they have MERS-CoV and hospital were closed, short time, GCI is on the doors. So urgency by itself is there. So you have JCI, you have everything. And if you look to Lewin's model, the unfreeze is by itself is kicking at that stage. So how did they create the sense? Basically, they created that the leadership came in. They created a tool. They showed everyone their readiness tool. How do they stand and their need to move to make sure that they get accreditation and they close things on time. Then they form a powerful guide for collegium. Basically, they created a committee which has superior people on that committee Also, department nominated some teams who can lead the change, and also they created some networks where people help each other and demonstrate that the act and become internal champion within the departments. And then creating the vision. So the committee by itself focus on that the organization wants to go to a data-driven organization. It helps them strategically how to move forward. And also it's becomes a more reliable organization and a user-friendly organization for the staff and for the patients. Then they start to communicate this, and they communicated very widely, and they shared awareness campaign everywhere. So they did emails, they did text, the messages, banners, digital, name it, everywhere. They communicate everything for the vision with everyone to make sure they're aligned with it. Then they start to empower people. So that committee by itself, one of the major primary, I would say, activities is that they receive feedback, they take it seriously, they act on it, they don't leave it hanging. So, and they try to overcome. So if they identify some leaders or resistance, they try to convert them to be advocate for that change. Then they celebrated quick wins where they leaders and clinical champions, they start to disseminate what they have done, their achievements and their daily openings. And then they build on the change. So basically what they have done is that they created a command center after the go live, and then adopting the absence of major safety incidents, building on that and reinforcing that. And then finally, where they embed the change basically by closing this command center after 2 weeks, signing effective implementation as a signal to the system, and then it becomes the new norm. Now, what was the outcomes? The worker satisfaction became 71%. Patient satisfaction moved from 40% to 90%. Also, the clinical outcomes for patient with diabetic type 2 has improved by 27%. And most importantly, in efficiency. So what happens in efficiency that waiting time in primary care used to take hours, it moved to 3 minutes and 22 seconds. And then also the capacity of appointments has almost doubled from 2,600 into 4,000. Another experience in Wuhan University in China, where the ICU had a hand hygiene compliance rate around 35%. The other issue is that they have a high rate of associated healthcare infections, staff resistance, and so on. So they thought of how do you create this sense of urgency. What they have done is that they presented the infection rate to all staff. And also they brought patient stories where that make more sense to people to understand what's happening. And then they demonstrate the financial impact of getting one infection. It costs around $25,000, which is a big amount. And then they formed the collegian where they recruited infection control nurses as champions. They also involved doctors because they also have a power to influence this. And also they looked at people who has a say in that, which is housekeeping. They might also disseminate infection indirectly if they don't use the proper techniques. So all of the stakeholders are involved. Then they created a very clear message, which is we want a 0% of infection rate in our ICUs. They connected that to the main mission of the organization, the safety mission. And then also they make it personal to the staff. So they label it, protect every patient like your family. So it becomes very clear, their mission. Then they start to communicate it in their daily huddles, the posters, the stories. Then they moved from that to empowering people. So they start to install more hand hygiene. They provided training. They make sure their stocks are available. And then they celebrated their wins through like the monthly improvement, recognizing high performance units and teams. And then they share the data that they reduced infection. Then to build on that capability, what they have done is that they start to monitor and give feedback to the department. They expand it, they move out from the ICU to other department. And what they have done, they made sure that this has become integral in the system. It becomes within the onboarding program for new hires or new joiners. And to sustain that, they updated their policies. They made it made the compliance part of their renewal and their annual renewals. And also they embedded within the organizational culture. How did that impact their outcome? Basically, the hand hygiene surged from 35 to 87%, which is a massive increase, more than 50%, or more, sorry, double. And also hospital-acquired infection has dropped by 50%. And if you can see, the sustainability is more than 3 years for such a project, and they were able to disseminate this model across different departments. So if we want to look into the success factor in the literature, so mainly leadership play a major role in that. So if you have a visible leaders that support you, you'll succeed. If you have a clear communication plan with your leaders and others, you'll succeed. If you have active participation of your leaders within the change, you will succeed. And then you need to prepare your leaders. Yes, they're leaders, but they're sometimes not prepared for change. So you need to train them on change management. They need to understand the phases. They need to understand how to coach others. And also they need to be provided with coaching and supporting on terms of like change. So it's not easy. Everyone needs to learn it. It's a journey. And then the culture. So when you're trying to make a change, you need to understand the culture of the organization. You need to make sure that it's aligned with the values of the organization. And especially when you're in healthcare, leverage the quality improvement activities that we do have, because it's also enforce and help in building on that. To sustain it, you need to make sure that you embed the change within the organization. You remove all the obstacles we mentioned a couple of times around policies and procedure, org structure. You need to make sure that you provide ongoing training, and also you need to make sure that it is a continuous monitoring. And when things go wrong, you need to take action to correct it. And finally, what I want you to take home with you is that resistance is natural. So you need to understand why it's happening so that you can build effective strategies. There is multiple models. So we did not mention, for example, the nudge theory. We did not mention a couple of models that is available. You can look at it and see what fits your organization best and what's applicable to your organization, or who's your audience, or even in your organization. I want to focus on communication because it's critical and it's very important. Is one of the major drivers of change, that if you communicate very well, you will succeed. And you need to engage people with you. You don't do change alone, because everyone is going to be impacted either directly or indirectly. So getting stakeholders involved will always boost your change and sustain it. And finally, to make sure that the effort is sustainable. Basically, you look at for long-term sustainability. So if it's working, change the org structure, change the policy if it's working. And I think that's our last slide. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdulaziz, for addressing this interesting topic. And thank you all for your active participation. So today we've explored the nature of resistance to change in healthcare, from an organizational route to the role of leadership, communication, and culture in governing it. We reviewed practical change management models like Lewin's, Kotter, and ATKAR, and we've seen how they translate into real-world success stories, such as the King Abdulaziz Medical City EMR rollout and Johannes Hospital infection control improvement. So the key message is very clear, as you mentioned, Dr. Abdulaziz. Resistance is natural, but with the right strategies and stakeholder engagement and sustained leadership commitment, transformation becomes not only possible, but successful and sustainable. So with that, I'd like to now open the floor for your questions and reflections. I know that we have a Q&A button on the top if you guys would like to put in your questions so we can share it with Dr. Abdulaziz and he can reflect back and maybe answer some of your concerns. We had a few hands raised. Dr. Abdulaziz, would you like to take their questions live, or would you like to, I still don't see anybody writing in the Q&A icon.
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Okay, we have Lubna. Lubna, would you like to share your question with us?
I think they don't see the button for Q&A. Lubna, you might try to take off your mic, so I think it's working now.
We do have a few questions. I don't see Lubna still raising her hand. Okay, so let me ask a few of the questions that came along, Dr. Abdulaziz. Maybe those were some of the concerns that that were there. Hold on, just opening those questions. Okay.
And for a reason,
So-
I cannot see the Q&A the same.
It's the same. I have it on the top bar where it says chat and Q&A.
Yeah, it's just chat for me.
For those of you
Fine.
who don't see the Q&A, please feel free to write your questions in the chat box, and we'll be more than happy to answer them as well. So one of the questions, Dr. Abdulaziz, was how can leaders behave differently to reduce this resistance? I know that leadership styles differ, but how can we embed this from within the different models of change?
So I think primary leadership, as we mentioned, that they need to walk the walk and demonstrate their effectiveness in terms of like helping others. How do they empower them? How do they remove obstacles? How they become a catalyst to the change, rather than thinking of their, for example, a power struggle or the hidden agendas that they might face, because it's also terrifying, because you might reach the territory of unknown. So if you don't have that open mindset to try and error, it might be a little bit tricky. And if you're trying to do a change with the leader, so like, for example, if you're on front line and you want your leader to come in, you need to have an explanation why do you want to do it and how that will impact your daily work. How would that impact your patient? How would that, if you can justify it from economical point of view, because that will have a buy-in. So and then you take it step by step with them to show small progress, small wins, so that it becomes more meaningful to people.
That's fabulous. We do have another question coming in. So what strategies work best when introducing new protocols in resource-limited settings?
So to be honest, usually this is very tricky. So you have to identify your landscape in terms of resources, because sometimes it's not just financial, because you might have a good financial, but you don't have other resources like the human capital, or like the systems are in place, or the system design by itself, like the policy and procedures. So you need to work around in terms, how do you create different models? So we start to see the model of care, for example. I'll give you an example of, like, for example, scarcity of resources. So if you want to deliver healthcare for everyone, we don't have enough doctors. So you need to create different methodologies of like using practitioner nurses to deliver care, for example, or gearing up other, like we have seen the initiative about the health coach, where they geared up, for example, nurses to make sure that they become a health coach, they help people on education, and they become active participation. So in terms of like limited resources, I think understanding what can you do with the current resources is very important. How can you get, for example, support from other departments or other colleagues that does not cost you? And then when you make the case really happening, I think you will have a resource coming in from higher management, because you have already shown results, you have shown an impact, and that may make something reasonable for them, because everyone wants to have something better, but they're afraid that if they invest, they will lose the investment completely.
Okay, wonderful. Another question that came along was, how can we implement change if we are not in a position that will be considered? So we do know that there are two urgencies or two types of urgencies for change. Some changes come from top down, and some changes come from bottom up. So in this case, how can we handle it? Because not all changes necessarily, from my humble readings, come from top down as well. So how do we answer that, or how do we tackle that?
I think finding the best window, because every change need to have the best window. So basically, if your organization is going into a strategy, so basically that's a very good window where you can plug in initiatives for change. The other window is that usually there is a competition in different hospitals around quality improvement. And that's a very, very good label. You don't need to say change. Basically, you say just quality improvement project. And usually you have a buy-in because quality is trying to have initiative every now and then. The other thing is that you need to find someone who has power and can help you in building the case. They will take it with you further with higher management. So I think finding the right window, finding the right empowerment in terms of leaders. It's not necessarily your line manager. You could find different people who are interested. So it might be the head of quality, for example. He will take the initiative with you, or she will take the initiative with you.
Okay, another common question, and this usually happens in any entity or any place where you have change. So whenever, as you mentioned, Dr. Abdelaziz, whenever you have change, it causes disturbance, right? So that causes a lot of resistance. Many questions are coming in how to tackle and how to deal with active resistance. Any advice on that?
I mean, it goes back to the root cause. Why? You have to understand why people are resistant. So is it something for personal? Is it they don't understand? Is it the lack of knowledge? Is it the lack of their comfort zone? Is it resource? It depends. Like we mentioned, there is a couple of root cause for that. You need to identify it. So and the takeaway I have mentioned that you need to understand what exactly is the root cause. And once you identify it, sometimes it's not very clear. So over time, sometimes you need to go to iterative process because sometimes people will not be explicit. So there will be passive resistance. You will not know why. They don't verbalize it. But over time, because I have seen it personally, when we want to change something, you go in with even higher leaders, and then you ask them for something, and they gives you a thumbs up, and then you end up 6 months the same place where you started. And then you have to identify key people other than this guy to influence them. So it's a little bit tricky. So for me, it's understanding the root cause. Why is it happening? And then how do you frame your problem? So the problem that you identify, you need to frame it in a way, either for them, for the patient, for the organization. Framing the problem by itself makes a big difference when you drive the change.
Okay, fabulous. So another question came along, and I believe you answered it, but maybe emphasizing on it would be important. A lot were asking on what were the best models of change. You did mention Lewins, you mentioned ADKAR, and you mentioned Kotter. They were mentioning, or the question mainly said, how do I know which one fits best?
I mean, there is no rocket science, to be honest, in our fixed way to do it. If you go to literature, usually people tend even to divert. They start with Kotter and then they add another dimension of another model. So I think the best way to know it is that to try it and see how it goes, and understanding the resource, because if you go for Kotter, for example, if you want to demonstrate every single step on it, it's going to be hectic, to be honest. You need a big team around that, and you need to see how does that fit in the context of the change that you want to do. Because sometimes for the leaders, you want to simplify it. You don't want to overburden them with a very complex model, and they don't understand it. You don't understand how to do it better with them. So simplifying it, I think the key. And then once it's okay, you can pivot to different models.
Okay, great. Maybe one or two last questions. So one of the questions came in, it mentioned, how do you ensure alignment between change initiatives and organizations' existing cultures and values? How can we put those initiatives to make it actually embedded in our culture and value in every entity, because every entity is available for change. So change, as we mentioned, change is something that will continue happening. So how can we make it a culture and a value in those entities, and how we can embed it?
So when you're doing any initiative, usually, even if we don't label it as a change, so if you're going to do, for example, strategy, I know that you work a lot, Sarah, around strategy, But usually you need to make sure that it's aligned with the organizational values. So if you try to create something that is not matching, I was reading about Amazon when they first introduced robotics and AI, and when they introduce it, suddenly they have a high quitting from employees. So the rates become high because they did not value the commitment of the employees, how they are doing it. The employees thought that they're replaceable, so that the turnover rate becomes shooting up to 30%. So first of all, the organization usually has values that we disseminated in every dimension, in terms of initiatives, in terms of communication. So the change by itself, the way that you frame it, needs to be framed, labeled with your values. That's number one. Secondly, if you're asking about how it becomes more around the culture, basically is that how do you change the obstacles? We mentioned around policy and procedures. We mentioned around, for example, the onboarding, what Johan has done at the hospital, also their policy and procedures. So it becomes the new norm for the organization. So I remember a story around a bank called ING Bank. So they wanted to move from a waterfall strategy into an agile strategy, which is a big transformation. So what they have done, they did not say that we're changing or shifting. No, they start to create something called the orange label. And then they start to change their workspaces, how they work together, the org structure, the policies, and then they embed this, becomes part of their organization. So I think it's going to be a part of trial and error till you reach to the point where you really embedded within the fabric or the DNA of the organization.
Great. Thank you so much for shedding the light on that. So maybe just one last question. How do you tailor communication strategies to different types of resistors? It seems like a lot of the questions, Dr. Abdulaziz, that are coming through are saying that, you know, the most common resistors are just afraid of losing opportunities, or they are just resisting because of, again, as you mentioned, the fear of change, the fear of the unknown. And this is very common. So how would you deal with that kind of change? I mean, that kind of resistance.
I mean, it's not easy, to be honest. And that's a very deep question. And usually you don't do it alone. Usually you need experts with you in communication, because the way that you construct the message, even in marketing. So you send the message, you test it, you do evaluation of the perception, and sometimes tweaking it. So I remember in terms of like one of the system, I cannot recall. So they wanted to have people who are engaging on or participating in their insurance. So they start to send messages, they test it, there is zero participation. Then they start to tweak it, that it might not impact your tax, it might help other people. And it creates a cumulative wins for everyone. It's not just you, it's the whole organization are winning. So I think they call it in the marketing A/B testing, where you do your, you send your message, you test it, you look at it. And most importantly, your message need to be clear, very simple, understandable to everyone. And also it shares the organizational value. And then getting an expertise, or asking, maybe testing it with a small group of people, just to test the tone of the message, and the clarity will be helpful before you start to disseminate it.
Okay, great. Dr. Abdulaziz, one last question. I was given the green light for that. In your experience, which leadership behaviors are most effective in reducing resistance to change in healthcare settings?
I would say maybe two behaviors, which is a collaborative behavior, basically, that usually collaborative, supportive, and also an initiator. So usually these three help, mainly these three help, and honesty, basically. Honesty is also important, because you need to walk the walk. So these four, I think, will be a key metric for any leader to try to drive the change. Because if people see you honest, leading the change and helping others and taking the initiative, they will follow for sure, especially your team, at least.
Okay, fabulous. I think we are done from the Q&A session. I just want to remind everybody to take the survey at the end of this session. And on behalf of the Saudi Patient Safety Center, we would like to thank Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Rabia and the audience for their active participation. And as part of the Saudi Patient Safety Center's efforts to provide you with timely topics and interesting speakers, we'd appreciate if you would fill out the evaluation survey sent to your emails right after the session. And thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you back in future webinars. Have a great evening, and thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a great evening.
Thank you.